Hey, welcome to Extra Healthy-ish, the big sister podcast to Healthy-ish. Both podcasts are from Body and Soul, and we have designed them to give you that little bit extra in your day for your mind, body, and yes, you guessed it, a soul. I am your host, Felicity Harley. Today, I'm chatting with Hugh Van Cuylenburg. You know him, right? He's the guy behind the Resilience Project. He's co-hoster of another fabulous podcast called The Imperfects and author of new book, Let Go. We are going to talk about it all today. Resilience, vulnerability, shame, and of course, letting go. Hugh, thank you so much for coming on Extra Healthy-ish. Now, I actually ask this question to everyone who comes on the podcast. How do you stay extra healthy-ish in your daily life?
So right now I fantasize about my routine, it's like I fantasize about my ultimate routine, and I realized that there was 35 years of my life when I didn't have kids where I could have actually done this every single day, and I've never been more motivated to be healthy at age 41, and I probably am the healthiest I've ever been. But if I didn't have kids, my gosh, I would shudder to think how healthy I'd be. Like I really, so. Healthy to me, so I'm a track runner. So my event is 400 meters, and my life revolves around trying to sprint as quickly as I can, and that's a very, very healthy endeavor. I have to say, like the impact that lack of sleep has on my training and poor diet has on training. So I'm eating the healthiest I've ever eaten in my entire life, motivated by the fact I want to run under 50 seconds for 400 meters. And it's just eating so well, and my sleep's still not great, but that's not my fault. That's my kids' fault. But for me, it's exercise. Like I really feel, I have so many people come up to me and talk about their mental health issues, and I genuinely feel like saying to them, here's a brand new pair of running shoes, wear these things out. I want you to come back and speak to me in 6 months and tell me how you're going. I just feel like exercise, well, it doesn't have to be running, but for me it is. It is what got me through the really harsh lockdowns, was my every second day at the track sprinting. It was because for me, the other thing is when you exercise, especially if you exercise in the morning, it doesn't matter when you do it, but when you do it in the morning, it influences how I eat for the rest of the day. I exercise, I think, well, I'm not going to waste, I've just done really good exercise. I'm not going to waste that by having a toasted ham and cheese sandwich. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I love toasted ham and cheese sandwich. But it makes me think I'm going to have some fruit and I'm going to have some eggs or just, whatever it is. And then I just naturally drink a lot more water throughout the day because I've exercised and I need to. And then I'm tired. I'm exhausted by the end of the day because I exercise in the morning. So I go to bed earlier, I sleep better. So to me, living healthy to me, and I know I talk a lot about gratitude, empathy and mindfulness, but for me, it's exercise.
There's that fabulous saying, motion changes emotion. And often, do you like that one?
I've never heard that before.
I use it a lot. And I always think when you're just feeling a bit flat, go for a run. I'm a bit like you. Running is my medicine.
Yeah, totally. It's the best, isn't it? Isn't running just, I'd love to do a separate chat with you to talk about running, but it's just I only really discovered it at age 36, 37, but I am obsessed, absolutely obsessed.
Okay, so from running to resilience. That was a nice segue, wasn't it?
Very good. You're very good at this.
Thank you. We're talking about resilience today. Secrets of resilience people. You are a resilient person. How do you describe resilience?
I heard a psychologist once say, I can't remember who it was. I was at a conference and he said, it's the ability to bungee jump through the pitfalls of life. And I really liked that. But I thought there was an extra element perhaps that you could probably add, is that I think that it's the ability to bounce back from the things but it's also the ability to bounce forward. So by that, I mean, it's like using your setbacks to make you stronger. Post-traumatic growth. At the severe and something really traumatic happens, you actually become stronger because of it. But I think resilience is about taking your circumstances and at the very least bouncing back, but sometimes saying it's actually going to make me stronger.
I like that concept of bouncing forward. I haven't actually heard that before, because so often resilience is, okay, what's happened in the past, I can keep on going. But what about propelling you to try new things and learn new things and pushing you?
At a very basic level, I well, not basic, but just front of mind for me right now is what's happened with COVID. I would say it was the toughest time for my wife and I in our relationship. We've been together for 7-8 years. I should know exactly, but it's around 7 or 8 years. And COVID, being in lockdown in Melbourne, was the toughest our relationship's been, and probably, I don't like saying worst, but I guess that's the best way to describe it. But now I look at the way we communicate and the way we are there for each other, and we're so much stronger. And we're so much stronger because of what we went through. I don't want to go through what we went through again with lockdowns, and we had a 1-year-old who just, well, it was her first year. She was 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. She would not stop crying. She just didn't, and throwing up constantly. And our 3-year-old was finding the world very challenging back then. And it was just, we were locked in the house together, and we struggled. The two of us struggled. There were points where we were really not good. And I never want to do that again. But we went through something tough, and because of that, we have had so many conversations we wouldn't have had that have made us stronger. And that, to me, is a really good example of resilience, bouncing back, but also bouncing forward. We've become stronger.
Actually, I feel like you're not alone in that. I mean, the amount of conversations I have with different people about that period in a relationship and how hard it was and how tough it was. And but many people got through, and I think that is a beautiful example of resilience. And I'm sure many listeners are probably on the same page. I mean, I can also be vulnerable and say, yes, with my husband, we went through probably the lowest point of our marriage during lockdown, but we got through.
Totally. And there's a great strength in that, isn't there? There's a great, you kind of like, you sort of look at each other across the dinner table sometimes and just sort of have this like knowing look of like, look at us. Like
we made it.
Yeah, we made it. Totally. Yeah. It's like I mean, I think of so many examples of specifically like my wife. I remember when I was really battling, I remember telling her in 2020, and her response just made me angrier. Like she got a bit angry that I think it was like, oh, so if you're struggling, like she goes, okay, well, I guess I have to spend more time with the kids then so you can have more time to yourself. And it was a very like angry kind of response. And that made me feel, I mean, it was great. I was getting more time to myself, but I just felt shit. And
guilty.
And I just didn't feel good with her. And we had an argument. She was trying to help me. She was trying to solve the problem, but we were arguing at the same time. And what we've sort of discovered was that through chatting to various people, but her response was to try and fix the problem straight away, when all we need is to be validated when we've got a problem in our life. And literally 3 days ago, I came home from work and I said, I'm feeling so overwhelmed with the amount of talks I got coming up. I'm feeling, it's really stressing me out. And she said, okay, well, I guess, and started to do it. And then she just stopped, and I walked outside to be with the kids, and she came out and she said, I hate hearing you're overwhelmed. I'm so sorry to hear that. It's an awful feeling when you feel overwhelmed. And I just took this deep breath and I felt so much better. And I remember thinking, gosh, like that's so good for our relationship, what just happened then. And we learned that through COVID. COVID taught us how to be there for each other in a better way. And I make it sound like she did all the learning, and it was both ways. It was both ways. That example is front of mind because of what happened 3 days ago.
That's a great example though, and a good reminder to all of us in a relationship that, often we just ourselves get in the way and our own problems and our own egos, and we just fail to put that aside and go, okay, what's going on for that person for this moment, and how can I make it better for that person?
Yeah, it's one of the most powerful lessons I've learned in my life. And a wonderful pediatrician who you should totally have on your podcast called Dr. Billy Garvey, he taught me this about dealing with kids. But as you were saying it, I was thinking, no, this is adults as well. He said, when a child comes to you with a problem, as an adult, as a parent, we just try and fix it for them. It's not what they want, and it's not what they need. What they need is to be heard and validated. And it's been huge for me with my kids. When my son's upset, I just say, I'll sit down on the floor and just say, I totally understand how you feel. I felt like this before, rather than trying to fix it. And what I've realized with adults, we are exactly the same. When we're not going well and we go and tell someone, which is a hard thing to do, we don't want them to fix the problem in that moment. We just want them to hear us and to be heard and to be validated. So you say to someone, I've felt like this before. It's awful. I know what that feels like. Or if you haven't felt like that before, I'm so sorry you're feeling that. I can tell this is really upsetting for you. And then later on, you try and help them. So we've gone down a different path, but I think it's an important one for especially in relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of that is, as you talk about in your book, vulnerability. What does this mean to you? And I suppose how have you got better at it over your time in the Resilience Project and talking about it and talking to other people about going through their vulnerabilities. And
so funnily enough and oddly enough, I think I've always been a very vulnerable person. But I've never known why. I've never known why I'm so open with people with my stuff ups. When I stuff up, I share it straight away. Or if I've embarrassed myself, I share it straight away. And the example that I gave in the book, one of them was when I met Hamish Blake, and we've Hamish and I've talked about it since now, sort of laughed about it. But I got so nervous that I couldn't communicate properly. I didn't know what to shake his hand or give him a fist pump or high five, and I just shook his fist really awkwardly. But and it was mortifying because I love Hamish, have for a long time, and I have so much admiration for what he's done, and I froze. I didn't know how to. Anyway, it was so embarrassing, and I shattered in the car on the way to do a talk for a school, and I opened that session with the kids telling that story, and I loved it, and I remember thinking, why do I feel the need to share all my stuff ups? Why do I think I'm such an oversharer? But now that I've researched vulnerability, I've realized in a roundabout way what I was doing was, so when we're vulnerable, when we take an emotional risk, the result more often than not is an authentic connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when someone's vulnerable with us, you don't go, oh shit, that sounds bad, and sort of turn our back on them. We open ourselves up to them, and we say, because we feel like, gosh, this person's really trusted me here, and we open ourselves up and we give them this really open, warm version of ourselves, and that's really connecting. In the Hamish example, it was an imperfection that we're so imperfect as human beings, but we spend so much time trying to cover up our imperfections. But and we do that because we want to belong. We want to belong to a group and people not to think we're really great. But the irony is, the more we share our imperfections, the more we'll actually connect. And I think instinctively I've always understood that. Or no, I haven't understood. Instinctively, I've always done that. But now I get why, I guess. But vulnerability is taking an emotional risk, which is so counterintuitive.
We'll be back after this short break with more from Hugh. And what about on the other end of the scale? Because we've got oversharing. You talk a bit about social media in your book. Yeah. So we've got one half, we've got to be more vulnerable, and I'm scared to be vulnerable. Then the other half, is it too vulnerable? I don't know. Is it oversharing? And when it's just too much?
There is absolutely a line there that is understanding. I walk this line, and I'm very aware of this with a lot of footy clubs that I work with, and Port Adelaide Football Club, an incredible example of it. And I won't go into it. They're their stories. I don't want to share their stories, but we asked them to have a think about would they love to get up in front of the group and talk about a hero or maybe a heartbreak from their life or something like that. And I remember then explaining to them that there's no such thing as forced vulnerability. We can't force this on you. If you're not comfortable, you don't do this. It's got to be a level of comfort, and think about what you're sharing with people. So I think you've got to, if you are going to share something, you think about, am I comfortable sharing this, and is it going to be okay for this person? Is it going to be too heavy for them to deal with? And if it is, then maybe it's a professional you need to speak to, or someone very, very close to your family member, because you never want to do harm. You're doing it to try and help yourself, but you just got to be careful. There is a line of yes, we can be too vulnerable is definitely the answer. But I think you kind of know instinctively, right? If you're going to share something with someone about yourself, you're just sharing your story. That's what it is. Human beings are so drawn to stories. We love stories. We always have. And so it's about sharing your story.
I think that's what's so great about your books. You are vulnerable in sharing your stories. You talk a lot about your emotional discomfort, and it's part of a human being, and obviously letting go. How can we get better at letting go of these things?
It's so funny. So the reason I called the book Let Go was I just found in all my sessions with my psychologist, at some point in the session she'd say, you need to let go of X, Y, and Z. So whether it was shame I had about the kind of brother I was when my sister was really sick, or whether it was the expectation I've always felt because my sister was really sick, I had to make the family happy, or whether it was, doing these talks I do around Australia. Every now and again I do these really great talks. I was like, that was perfect. And then I had this expectation that everything else had to be perfect. We were chatting before we started this interview that when I spoke to the Sydney Swans, I still think about the fact how far from perfect it was, and I was just so devastated for so long. But And I've got many more examples than when I wasn't perfect, plenty of examples, because I'm always imperfect. But so many times my psychologist kept saying, you need to let go of that. And I'd say, okay, I agree, but how? Like, I want to know what practical steps am I taking here to let go? And so she would give me practical strategies for all those things I had to let go of. And I'd write them in a little journal. And I'd read them at night when the kids had gone to bed and Penny had gone to bed, because I didn't want anyone to see what was in my journal, which was very personal, because I was taking notes during my psychology sessions. And then one night I just thought, I think I need to share this stuff. Like, I think this stuff is so, I think about all my friends. I was thinking about one of my best mates who's been through a lot. And I was just thinking about him and thinking, I need to tell him this stuff. I was thinking, no, I need to also tell this person. Oh, this person needs to know. And then it just became this, I was like, no, everyone needs to know how we do this stuff. So that's why I put all this stuff into a book. Yeah, I haven't answered your question, but how do we let go of shame, for example? My psychologist took me through this wonderful 3-step process to let go of shame. I felt for a long time I was a bad person, because when my sister was sick, I just abandoned the family, basically. I was 18 years old. I had a girlfriend for the first time, and I had my license for the first time. So I spent majority of my 18, 19-year-old years at my girlfriend's house, because it was much easier and much happier than my house. And ever since then, I've felt like I'm a bad person. And my psychologist, I'll give you this is just an example of things you can do. So the 3 very quick examples, she said, separate who you are from what you did. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you're not a bad person. You made a bad decision. That doesn't make you a bad person. You made a bad decision. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's it. I'm not a bad person. There's evidence, a lot of evidence stacks up that I'm a good person. I made a bad decision, but I've been saying I'm a bad person. In fact, I'd feel awkward when people would thank me for talking at their school. They'd go, oh, we just think you're so amazing. And I'd always have this awkward thing inside of me of like, if you only knew, I'm actually not a good person because I abandoned my sister when she needed me. That was really freeing, because I went, oh, no, I'm not a bad person. I just did a bad thing. So that's step number 1. Step number 2, empathize with that version of yourself. So I thought, hang on, I was 18 years old. I had a girlfriend for the first time in my life and a driver's license. Like, of course I'd spend time at my girlfriend's house. Like, there's lots of fun stuff that we could do.
Absolutely, when you're 18.
I was 18, yeah, exactly. For the first time in my life, like, or be at home and it's really miserable. Like, that's a no-brainer for an 18-year-old. Yeah. In fact, age 41, I think I'd probably make a similar decision. So not only do I empathize, I forgive that version of me. And then the third thing is to share your story, like share your shame story. Because when you keep it in your head, you judge yourself, and we're so hard on ourselves. We've got to cut ourselves some slack and so I started telling people about the fact that and every single person I said, oh yeah, of course you do that. Like, some of my mates knew my girlfriend at the time. I was like, yeah, she was awesome. Like, of course she wanted to meet her. I was like, and so that's an example of how I've let go of that shame. I've totally let it go through that. But everything I talk about in the book, whether it's shame, expectation, perfection, ego, there's little strategies at the end of each chapter to help you kind of let go.
Yeah, they're very helpful. Hugh, it was wonderful having you on Extra Healthy-ish. Thank you for chatting today.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, Felicity.
I hope you enjoyed this chat with Hugh. You enjoyed his vulnerability. You listened to his stories and felt that perhaps you connected with some of them too. It's about going inward before letting go. If you want to know more from Hugh, his book, it's called Let Go, and it is out now. If you want more from us, remember Extra Healthy-ish. We publish a new episode of this podcast every morning, Monday to Thursday. For more, head to bodyandsoul.com.au or join the conversation via Body and Soul on Instagram or Facebook. Thanks again for joining us. And hey, if you have a moment, we'd love it if you could rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Hey, and until tomorrow, stay extra healthy-ish.